Shana Tova again, and thank you for watching us from wherever you are this afternoon. My friends, this past March, life dramatically changed for all of us. Before March, we were shaking hands with friends and often with people we barely knew. We didn't think twice about touching doors in public places or riding our exercise bikes next to strangers. Then all of a sudden, it was the closing down of the NBA and March Madness, followed by schools, restaurants, bars, movie theaters, and gyms. A walk to the park with a group of friends suddenly became taboo. Purell went for $50 a bottle. We hoarded Lysol and sanitizers like they were gold. The only good news was that for a brief time, there was a shortage on bacon. The endless national hatred of the Astros finally looked silly and immature. The endless hating of Bill O'Brien, that hasn't really stopped. A popular tweet circulated across social media. What is a Corona coaster? It's the ups and downs of a pandemic. One day you're loving your bubble, doing workouts, baking banana bread, and going for long walks. And the next day, you're crying, drinking gin for breakfast, and missing people you don't even like. Or another one from a woman my age, she wrote, in an unsettling reversal of my teenage years, I'm now yelling at my parents for going out. 6 months later, we continue to run from people who innocently sneeze or cough. In normal times, if I had seen one of you in the grocery and walked away, you would rightfully think I'm a jerk. But now, if I went up to you and tried to start up a conversation, I would be a jerk. We still have to watch the company we keep, touching things, being with other people, even breathing the same air in an enclosed space is risky, even life-threatening. Since March, we have tried our best not to socialize with anyone outside of our immediate circles. It continues to be a time in which we try to keep away from each other. I miss the filled Freeman Levitt Sanctuary on Friday nights. I miss large synagogue programs. I miss celebrating life with so many of you. I still cannot believe on one of the holiest days of the year, the Barg Sanctuary, our synagogue, is empty. I never thought I would see the day. Following the traumatic communal events of our past, we poured out of our homes to support those in need, even members we had never met before. Such altruism helped all of us. Now the pandemic has driven us apart when we have needed each other the most. We've not been able to pour out of our homes and find healing by physically being with each other. Rather, COVID-19 has turned our colleagues and neighbors, our friends and fellow members, into a source of fear. So I have one question to ask you. Once this pandemic is over, will we return to Beth Yeshurun? Some are saying no. They say that even when it is safe, many of us won't return. The naysayers claim that, God forbid, this could be the end of synagogues like ours. We'll become accustomed to being away, forming new habits, new activities to do on Friday nights, or we will stick to the new online ways of creating Jewish experiences, the Jewish experiences we have needed. Even when it is no longer required, they say social distancing from synagogues will sadly continue. The truth is, even before this pandemic, in too many ways, we were already socially isolated. Decades ago, it used to be that after a hard day's work, most people ventured outside to socialize with neighbors, or headed to places like the synagogue to catch up with their friends. But over the last several decades, new trends had begun, to the point that for too many, after a day at work, we would quickly clean up after dinner, not to go socialize, but rather so we could go sink into our recliners to binge watch Netflix. In many ways, we were already secluded in our own digital cocoons, our modern-day home bubbles of Hulu and Amazon Prime, Facebook and TikTok. The drugs of social media and other digital treats had already done a great job of physically separating us. As writer David Suissa notes, even before the pandemic, two words really defined our age: social distancing. It's been 20 years since Robert Putnam wrote the all-important book, Bowling Alone. He warned that even then, that our stock of social capital, the very fabric of our connections with each other, had plummeted, impoverishing our lives and communities to the point that we had become increasingly disconnected from family, friends, neighbors, even our democratic structures. We had become an America where commitment to institutions was waning, and joining anything was no longer the social norm, contributing to increasing levels of depression and loneliness. I'll never forget last December when I read about a woman in Tulsa who used a Craigslist post to plead for holiday companionship. She wrote, quote, "Anybody need a grandma for Christmas? I'll even bring food and gifts for the kids. I have nobody, and it really hurts." I know that there are too many who are like her. And now with this pandemic, we are a nation of people that has never been more alone. It's so frustrating that the biggest health crisis of our time is calling on us to accelerate our seclusion. The irony is hard to miss. At a time when we've already reached a peak of social separation, a lethal disease has forced us to be even further apart. The disturbing trends that have corroded our mental and emotional health for years are now the cure to secure our physical health. It's become separation on top of separation, distancing on top of distancing, with devastating results. Many of us are struggling with our mental health, some for the very first time. A recent survey found that 40% of all American adults are now reporting symptoms of depression or anxiety. 40%. More than 3 times the rate from a survey conducted before the pandemic, when rates were already too high. Nearly 11% of Americans over the age of 25 have reported seriously considering suicide in the last 30 days, an all-time high. Yes, social distancing is vital to defeat this virus, but it's also causing so much pain and hardship. One study showed that social isolation is itself as harmful to our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. John McCain put it well when he said that after 5.5 years of being a prisoner in Vietnam, that being kept solitary crushes your spirit and weakens your resistance more effectively than any other form of mistreatment. So I must add, if you are hurting, it's understandable. Many of us are. Please reach out to someone who can help, a loved one, a friend, a colleague, one of us at the synagogue. Everybody deserves to be healthy, and mental health is your health. It's like taking care of your blood pressure. Please, get the help you deserve. My friends, with all that I have said today, I have to remain hopeful. I do think that the social isolation we have all experienced and will continue to experience until this virus is defeated could actually change all of us, even our entire society, for the better. Because the pandemic has forced all of us, to be painfully aware and to painfully experience the lack of community can be psychologically poisonous. Being deprived of community for so long has woken us up, and I think reminded us that our connections with large groups actually protect us against anxiety, against uncertainty, and against toxic isolation. maybe when this is all over, we will all appreciate the fact that in the company of large groups, threats become challenges, painful shocks hurt less, and loneliness becomes togetherness. Because at our very essence, we are still social beings, hungry for as much human contact as possible. I recently heard Brene Brown put it best when she said, "We are neurobiologically hardwired to be in connection with large groups of people. We're not made for long-term chosen isolation, that at our cores, we are still creatures of community." But it's not just about our psychological need to be connected to large groups. This odd time in history has reminded all of us, Judaism is designed to be lived in the plural with others. Our tradition has always had a strong communal dimension. On our holiest days like today, we don't call out to God, "Hear my prayer." We say, "Shema Kolenu," hear our prayer. In Hebrew, a synagogue is not called a house of worship, but a Beit Knesset, a house of gathering. And whether or not we are talking to God, we love singing and talking with one another. There's a reason you can't say Mourner's Kaddish or take out a Torah without 10 Jewish adults. It's not that God can't hear us until there's a 10th person in the room. It's that we need one another. We need one another to do it right, be it praying together, learning together, or just kvetching together. For thousands of years, we have built houses of study, synagogues, and schools so we can come together to learn, to worship God, and to pass on our traditions from one generation to another. In so many ways, social separation is the opposite of our religion, because Judaism has always said, it's not what we do with our solitude, it's what we do with the people in our community. It's about coming into contact with people you can trust, who can support you when life is not fair, who can challenge you to be even more. As author Brian Solis writes, community is much more than belonging to something. It's about doing something together that makes belonging matter. Yes, there are numerous reasons we all belong to a synagogue like ours, but ultimately it's about connecting and creating friendships with large groups of like-minded people who share our Jewish values so we can change ourselves, our loved ones, and our world for the better. No matter how strong your Wi-Fi connection is, you can't recreate those experiences online. Yes, online connections can expand our audience because they're quick and easy. But as we have now seen, online connections cannot compensate for the loss of face-to-face encounters. They don't give us the close and intimate human interaction we all need. Who isn't sick of Zoom? This past week, after months of online classes, 2 of my children were finally able to go back to their high school. They were so excited to be in the classroom with their teachers in person. I never thought I would see the day. Participating in a Zoom class, praying alone at home, or listening to a sermon online can only go so far. It's the feeling of togetherness that moves us. Yes, being part of a synagogue can bring extra commitments, but by doing so, we become part of something that is genuine, long-lasting, eternal. My parents moved to Dallas when I was a young child. They knew no one. But I saw all of that change when they became founding members of a small conservative shul in far north Dallas. That synagogue gave them the community they needed to raise their 3 children. Now, when I was a child, it wasn't always great for me. We would go to services every Friday night, but at the oneg afterwards, we were often the very last family to leave. My dad was that guy who spoke to every single person at the Kiddush. As a small child, I would complain and complain, tugging at my father's jacket, that it was time to go. I never would have thought that I would become that same guy who also speaks to everyone at the oneg. At least I made a career out of it. And now that I am that guy, I treasure the sense of community we have here at Beth Yeshurun. I think it's our number one asset. There's just something so powerful about this place. I think many of you feel it when you walk in these doors. We are more than a building. We are a shared Jewish experience that can best be felt by coming through our doors. If we have learned anything, once this awful pandemic is over, can we do even more to increase the power of our community? To include and be there even more for the lonely young adult, the elderly couple with no family, for the widow living by herself for the very first time, or for the person who lost his job, the spouse who now finds themselves divorced, or for the newcomer to town who decided to give us a try. That is my central prayer for this Rosh Hashanah. Being deprived of each other for so long won't accelerate our descent into self-imposed isolation. Rather, it will enhance our resolve to be part of something larger than ourselves. That's why I remain hopeful, very hopeful. I strongly disagree with the naysayers who say that this pandemic is the end of large congregations such as ours. Rather, I think it will create an incredible and awesome rebirth. NBA owner and Shark Tank entrepreneur Mark Cuban recently suggested that despite the pandemic, we should be investing in sports ticket sales. His prediction is that when social distancing restrictions lift, people will flock to communal events. More than ever, we will crave the human connection and gatherings that feed our spirits and our souls. I cannot agree more. And as great as sporting events can be, there's nothing better than a synagogue community to feed our Jewish souls. Or as my teacher, Rabbi Brad Artson, writes, we need religion, whether or not we are believers, because there is no human enterprise more capable than religion for building community. Yes, for now, we watch services on a screen instead of gathering in the synagogue. But when this pandemic wanes, I believe we will gladly trade our sweatpants for suits and join together in record numbers. I cannot wait to see all of you at services and programs, b'nai mitzvah and weddings, school assemblies, and high holidays. I now end with the wise words of a writer who wrote back in March, when this is over, may we never again take for granted a handshake with a stranger, conversations with neighbors, a crowded theater, Saturday night out with new friends, coffee with an acquaintance, the stadium roaring, life itself. Life itself. Shana Tova.